she won't recognize it in the heat of an argument. Not when her last message goes without a response. Not even when you finally stop reaching out. That's not when it happens. The realization that she needs you again comes much later. It arrives in the quiet, when no one is watching, and her pride is no longer loud enough to shield her from herself. It sneaks up on her in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday. No warning, no dramatic lead-up, just a sudden pause in her busy day and an uninvited memory. She opens an old app, stumbles across an old photo, or hears a song that unexpectedly sounds like you. And it hits her, not just the thought of you, but the feeling of being around you. That calm, that presence, that silent security she never fully appreciated. And that's when it starts. At first, it's just a subtle tug, a fleeting thought. But the mind doesn't let go so easily. What she once brushed aside now feels impossible to replace. She'll recall how it felt to be with you. Not just the thrill of something new, but the deep comfort of being understood without needing to explain herself. The way you never flinched when she was distant. The way you made space for her uncertainty without demanding answers. The way you never tried to fix her, just stood firm, steady, real, unmoved. And it won't be the silence that unsettles her the most. It'll be the absence of connection. She's had conversations since you, shared laughs, maybe even gone on dates. But none of them saw her the way you did. None of them listened without expecting something in return. None of them carried that rare balance of strength and softness that made her feel safe without needing to be in control. Because here's the truth she never wanted to admit. She didn't push you away because you were wrong for her. She pushed you away because you were real. You didn't bring her chaos, you gave her clarity. And clarity is terrifying when someone isn't ready to face themselves. But now, she's feeling the void. Not because of something you said, but because your silence is pure. It's not bitter. It's not cold. It's not calculated. It just exists. And that's what stings the most. You're not playing the game anymore. You're living, growing, becoming the kind of man who doesn't need external validation to recognize his worth. And in a moment she never expected, it finally dawns on her. Not just the loss of a person, but the loss of someone who never tried to hurt her, yet still walked away. That's the moment she understands. Not out of ego, not out of loneliness, but because, for the first time, she sees your absence for what it truly is, evidence that she was never losing you. She was losing herself. And that's when everything shifts. Not just her thoughts, but her body language, her energy, her entire mood. She grows restless. Because when you were in her life, you created something she didn't recognize until it was missing, emotional gravity. You grounded her. You were the stillness in her storm, the quiet in her noise, the anchor when her emotions spun out of control. But now that you're gone, everything feels lighter, but not in a way that brings relief. It feels hollow. She keeps up with her daily life. She still laughs with friends, still responds to messages. But inside, something is off. She no longer feels as secure, as steady. And she knows exactly why. But her pride, it still lingers. It whispers, don't reach out. Don't seem desperate. He'll come back first. So instead, she watches from a distance. She becomes an observer of your life. She sees that you're not broken. She sees that you're not chasing. She sees you doing the one thing she never predicted. You're healing. And that does something dangerous to her ego. Because when a man heals in silence, it reveals everything she tried to hide. The attention she once commanded, gone. The emotional leash she assumed would keep you circling back, snapped. The role she played in your life, rewritten, not by words, but by actions. And here's the hard truth she must now confront. She miscalculated your silence. She thought if she ignored you long enough, if she distanced herself, if she withdrew, you'd break. You'd chase. You'd beg for answers. But you didn't. You accepted the space. You honored her decision. You gave her exactly what she asked for, distance. And in that space, she expected freedom. Instead, she found a mirror. Because in that silence, she doesn't see you unraveling. She sees you becoming stronger, sharper, more focused. The man she once claimed she wanted is now evolving, without her. And that realization doesn't just sting, it lingers. It unsettles. It forces her to confront questions she tried to ignore when she walked away. What if I was the one who wasn't ready? What if he was the right one at the wrong time? What if I just lost the only person who ever made me feel safe without needing to control them? These thoughts don't fade. They multiply. Meanwhile, you remain silent. Not out of bitterness, but out of strength. Because you're not waiting anymore. You're evolving. And that evolution forces her to see what she never could before. You didn't disappear. You grew. And now, she's the one trapped in the version of herself that hasn't moved. That's the wound pride cannot protect her from. At some point, pride begins to crack. Not because of anything you said, but because of the silence she can no longer ignore. Because silence doesn't just create absence, it creates imagination. And the mind fills in the blanks. She wonders what you're doing. More than that, she wonders who you're becoming without her. She might scroll through your social media, searching for clues. Is he moving on? Is he with someone else? Why does he look even better now than when we were together? And that shakes her. Because now, it's not just about missing you. It's about missing the version of you she no longer has access to. She never thought you'd keep going without her. She assumed leaving would slow you down, make you wait, keep you in limbo. But you did the opposite. You didn't pause, you evolved. And that realization changes everything. Now, she's no longer comparing you to other men. She's comparing every other man to you. And the truth is, none of them measure up. Not in presence. Not in depth. Not in the way you made her feel when the world was too loud, and she needed someone steady. You weren't just another man. You were the man who stood firm when her world was spinning. And that's something no amount of charm, money, or attention can replicate. But now that she sees it, she can't control it. What she thought was distance has turned into detachment. And detachment is something far more powerful than distance. It means you no longer react. You no longer seek validation. You no longer ask, what did I do wrong? Because you've already answered that question by walking away with your dignity intact. And that's the final blow. She knows now. She lost something real. Not because you blocked her. Not because you cut her off. But because you've simply outgrown her. You don't belong in a space where you weren't valued. And she finally understands that. She's not just missing a man. She's missing a presence, a stability, a depth. She's missing the version of herself that only existed when you were in the room. And that's the pain pride can't mask. That's the regret she won't say out loud. But you walked away. And in doing so, you became the lesson she wasn't ready to learn. But now, without you, everything feels weightless, but not in a good way. It feels hollow. She's still going through her daily routines, still laughing with friends, still responding to messages. But deep down, she's checking in with a version of herself that no longer feels as stable. Because something is missing, and she knows exactly what it is. Yet her pride, it's still there. It reminds her, don't text him. Don't look weak. He'll come back first. So instead of reaching out, she watches. She becomes a quiet observer of your life from afar. She notices that you're not crumbling. You're not chasing. You're doing the one thing she never anticipated. You're healing. And that does something dangerous to her ego. Because when a man heals in silence, it forces her to see the truth she's been avoiding. The attention she once controlled, gone. The emotional hold she thought would keep you circling back, broken. The role she once played in your life, rewritten, not by words, but by your actions. And now, she has to confront the reality she never expected. She underestimated your silence. She assumed that if she ignored you long enough, if she distanced herself, if she stayed quiet, you would fold. You would run after her. You would demand answers. But you didn't. You respected the space. You honored her decision. You gave her exactly what she asked for, distance. But in that distance, she didn't find freedom. She found a reflection. Because in that silence, she doesn't see you falling apart. She sees you evolving, becoming sharper, more grounded, more focused. The man she always claimed she wanted, now becoming that man without her. And that realization doesn't just sting. It lingers. It unsettles her. Now, the questions start creeping in. The ones she never let herself ask when she walked away. What if I wasn't ready? What if he was the right one at the wrong time? What if I just lost the only person who ever made me feel safe without trying to control him? And these questions don't fade. They multiply. But you remain silent. Not out of bitterness, but out of strength. Because you're no longer waiting. You're growing. And that growth is what makes her realize something painful. You didn't just disappear. You outgrew the version of yourself that needed her validation. And now she's the one stuck in place. That's the wound her pride can't protect her from. Because there comes a point when pride starts to crack. Not from anything you said, but from the silence she can no longer ignore. You see, silence doesn't just create distance. It creates imagination. And the mind fills in the blanks. The more time passes, the louder those thoughts become. She starts wondering where you are, what you're doing, but more than that, who you're becoming without her. She might scroll through your social media, looking for clues. Is he moving on? Is he seeing someone? Why does he look better now than when we were together? And that realization? It shakes her. Because it's not just about missing you. It's about the version of you she no longer has access to. The man who once sent her good morning texts, now putting that energy into himself. The man who once waited for her responses, now prioritizing his peace. The man who gave her endless chances, now no longer willing to convince anyone of his worth. And let's be honest, this is not what she expected. She thought walking away would leave a mark on you, that you'd pause your progress, put your life on hold, sit in the background until she decided you were worthy again. But instead, you did the opposite. You didn't hit pause. You hit evolve. And that's what disrupts her the most. Because now, she's not comparing you to other men. She's comparing every man to you. And the worst part? None of them measure up. Not in presence. Not in intention. Not in the way they made her feel when her world was loud and she needed someone steady. Because you weren't just a man who showed up. You were the man who stayed still when everything else was spinning. And that's something no charm, no status, no material thing can replicate. But here's the twist. Now that she sees it, now that she feels it, it's too late to control it. Because what she thought was just space has become detachment. And detachment? That's when you no longer react to her energy. You no longer seek her validation. You no longer ask, what did I do wrong? Because you've already answered that question by walking away with your dignity intact. And now, she's left watching the very man she once took for granted transform into the version of himself she always said she wanted. And here's the final blow. She knows she no longer has access to him. That version of you doesn't chase. That version of you doesn't settle. That version of you doesn't return to places where he was once undervalued. And the most unsettling truth for her, that version of you never needed her to become this man. You just needed the silence to wake you up. And now, she's stuck. Not because of anything cruel you said, but because you said nothing at all. And that silence? It doesn't just confuse her. It exposes everything. She's finally seeing something she never realized when she had your attention. Your presence wasn't just about attention. It was about intention. You didn't show up because it was convenient. You showed up because you chose her. You stayed, even when she was distant, uncertain, guarded. And now, she's feeling the weight of what happens when a man like that finally chooses himself. The call she assumed you'd eventually make? Never come. The "I miss you" text she expected weeks ago? Still left unsent. And with every day that passes without your energy chasing hers, another piece of her confidence starts to crack. Not because you're trying to break it, but because she's finally seeing the truth. You gave her peace. She gave you chaos. You gave her clarity. She met it with confusion. You gave her honesty. She played games. You stood firm when she pushed, hoping you'd fight harder to stay. But now that you've stepped away, she's finally asking herself the questions she never dared to ask before. Why did I think pushing him away would prove my worth? Why did I need to see him hurt before I felt powerful? Why does he look freer without me? And here's the deepest cut of all. She's realizing that her sense of power came from your pursuit. Every time you reached out, every time you tried to fix things, every let's talk, every are you okay? It made her feel wanted, important, irreplaceable. But now, that energy is gone, and she doesn't just miss you. She misses who she was when she had your presence in her life. Because that's what people forget after breakups. They don't always miss the person. They miss the version of themselves they were when they were with you. And right now, without your grounding, without your steady presence, without your energy reflecting back her softness, her depth, her realness, she's lost. She used to walk away to feel powerful. Now, she stays silent, hoping you'll break first, just to prove you still care. But all she sees is you rising. More focused, more disciplined, more unshaken. Not because you stopped caring, but because you finally started caring about yourself more. And that shift, that's what flips the entire dynamic. Because the man she once controlled is no longer reacting. And the version of you she once knew, that version no longer exists. You've leveled up, not to make her regret it, but because you were finally ready to become the man who no longer begs to be seen.